This week the agenda talked about the transition to retirement. We explored the quest for transgender rights and sought a global strategy for Alzheimer's and dementia. The agenda's Week in Review now begins by asking what compels your neighbor, your friend, your co-worker to fight a holy war halfway around the world. Let's go around our table here and just explore what compels somebody to abandon their normal middle-class Canadian life to join IS, for example. Jordan, you've thought about this? Give us some ideas. Start with one.
Well, we don't know how much of it is temperament. We do know that people who are drawn to more fundamentalist causes, at least on the right-wing end of the spectrum, are more orderly in their temperament and less open, which is a marker of broad-mindedness and creativity. So there's temperamental contribution. And then the period of late adolescence is also a time when people catalyze their identity. And I think that people who have one foot in each culture, or in two cultures, have a particularly difficult time in doing that. So sometimes they're impelled to make a move of radical simplification instead of trying to mediate between the moral demands of two cultures. So I would say that's a start. We shouldn't also underestimate the allure of adventure. You know, I mean, people have marched off to war happily on many different occasions. So,
for centuries.
For centuries.
Indeed they have.
Yeah.
Okay. Lauren Dawson, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I'd reinforce all of that because Jordan's hit upon many of the main factors. Another element that I always add in here is that morality plays a central role, and that does tie into the fact that it was mentioned that those who convert to more extreme or fundamentalist viewpoints often are seeking this order in the world. They want things to be more sharply, clearly defined and delineated. And a lot of the factors are similar to what might lead someone to join a gang or do other things. The key differentiating variable is this drive for a moral purpose, this drive to be associated with a just cause, the sense of giving a grander meaning to your life because you're associating yourself with being on the side of the righteous. So that moral component, we're uncomfortable in our society talking about it now in some ways, but I'd say that's an additional element to what has been mentioned already.
That's such a perfect segue to you, who I'm guessing was not born a Muslim, but are a Muslim today.
Yeah. Clearly,
though, converting to Islam and then joining IS, I mean, there's a million miles between those two things. You've done the former, but not the latter. So what is it about the latter that so many people find so intriguing?
A simplistic view of the world. I mean, it's black and white. It's the believers and the non-believers. And when you convert to Islam, as I did about 15 years ago, you are looking for that moral clarity. Sometimes, you know, people don't see it, but delusions of grandeur. We come in and we're sort of built up in our community. You wouldn't know this, but from the inside, we get told we're all forgiven for our sin, we're really good, we're better than everyone else because now we've started with a clean slate. And then what happens is sometimes we get bitter because the community, other than getting excited for our conversion, kind of leaves us high and dry. They don't really give us moral and social support. So we sometimes get driven to the internet, which is now what's happening, and then you're finding legitimate grievances overseas, and you're sort of, you know, you're framing in your mind an idea that there's this utopian view of the Islamic State. But the reality is they're getting attracted to the grievances because many of them are legitimate. You can't say they're wrong for having compassion for the people of Syria and around the world who are being oppressed, but then they put their uneducated and narrow-minded view of Islam as a dangerous cocktail, and when that happens, it leads into obviously them going there and joining a group that perhaps even when they're there, they don't even realize what they got themselves into.
Well, I agree with almost everything that's been said here on the panel, so there's no need to repeat that. The one thing I would add here is that in the imagining of the Islamic origins and what that means for the longevity of the Islamic faith and its interpretation, it has been thought by Muslims that Islam is a political system that must dominate every other system, and this must be the state of affairs for all time to come. And lo and behold, it so happens that the caliphate has been abolished in 1924, and now the Muslim young man or woman trying to understand his or her faith and his or her place in within the wider world now sees that Muslims largely do not have any real power. Some of the Muslim powers seem to be puppets for other powers. And instead of Muslims calling the shots in the world, it looks like we're being shot at in every different way. And so the entire thing seems to have been turned upside down. And it looks like something radical has to be done to change the state of affairs to bring it back to the ideal. So what needs to happen now is that Muslims need to deconstruct that original narrative, which has been a misinterpretation to begin with. We have to, in understanding our faith, distinguish between what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did as a prophet and as a speaker on behalf of God, and what he did, on the other hand, as a human being living in his time and place, including his engagement in politics. And we also need to distinguish between the way things were in the world at the time and the way things are in our present world. And specifically, I have here in mind the idea that in the ancient world, communities were divided, and that was the nature of the game. People expanded or they were being engulfed. Nowadays, the nature of our life is that we enter into international conventions to make sure that people do not dominate each other, that we live in peace, we do not attack each other, we can go to bed safely at night knowing that we'll get up tomorrow and we'll attend school. So that life tomorrow will be similar to life today, and we wouldn't be bombed to smithereens in the middle of the night. So we need to draw those two distinctions very clearly between what the Prophet Muhammad did as a prophet and what he did as a human being, and the second distinction between the way in which things were at the time and the way things are now.
There was a point that I wanted to make with respect to religion and the role that religion is thought to play in radicalization. And it's very often I think, simply understood as a risk marker, right? People who become too religious, oh, we should worry about them. Perhaps. However, what the research shows is that for the vast majority of people, religion and Islam is a protective factor. Right? People who are deeply religious, are not those people who are taking up arms and going overseas, right? They're the people who believe in more peaceful ways of dealing with conflict and grievance. And certainly that also fosters a particular collective dynamic. And so I can speak to within the Somali diaspora in Toronto, for example, there are very, very, very aggressive counterframes in place within that community that view al-Shabaab and al-Shabaab's use of the Quran as a perversion of Islam. And very, very thoughtful counter rebuttals to many of the claims, the religious claims that al-Shabaab makes in their recruitment strategies. So I think we also need to look at religion as, for the vast majority of people, as a protective factor rather than a risk marker. And I think that we also need to be aware that religion and interpretations of the Quran that are grounded in reality and not in misinterpretations or in perversions can play a very key role in shaping opposition to radical groups within communities.
Dirk, help us understand why, unlike with many other afflictions, illnesses, conditions, diseases, and so on, where there have been great breakthroughs over the last 10, 15 years, there's been almost nothing in terms of medical breakthroughs when it comes to dementia or Alzheimer's.
Well, I think first the issue is again the funding. I mean, I think we haven't really seen the effort which has been there in cancer, which has been in a lot of the other diseases. So I think that's part of the issue. I think the other part is as Mimi was saying, basically this is a very complex disease. There's a lot going on here. So some of the science isn't really there yet. And partly that is the effort which we need to make. We need to get the funding there. And also that has meant that for pharmaceutical companies, it's really been hard to take that science, which wasn't really there yet, and take it to a drug. So I think we've seen over the past 15 years or so, about 115 drugs which went to clinical trials, and only 3 or 4 of them have come out of that and basically have been approved as drugs, and they only treat symptoms. So we're not there yet. So it's really, I think, this whole sustained effort throughout the innovation process which needs to happen, and that's what we are trying to work on at the moment.
It sounds, Mimi, like very little progress has been made in terms of research or understanding how Alzheimer's or dementia works. Is that fair to say?
Very fair to say. It is an extremely complex disease. We know that. We don't know the cause and we don't know the cure. We know, starting to understand some of the mechanisms of the disease and what's actually happening.
Mechanisms meaning what?
Meaning in terms of what's actually going on in the brain and what are some of the changes that are happening, but we don't know cause and effect. The other big issue is that we now understand a lot more that the disease starts at least 20 years before the first symptoms appear. And therefore, the reason for a lot of the drug trials that have failed is because we're treating the people too late in the disease process.
So by the time it shows up, and you can see it show up, you may be 20 years in and it's too late to do anything about it.
Well, and that's why I think the whole effort of trying to understand the mechanisms or what's going on in the brain is so important, and why we need to invest dollars into research to be able to explore that even more than we're doing now.
Is the diagnosis of this disease, I mean, are we making any headway on it? That sounds not good at all, 20-year lead time.
You know, I would really say that we are making some progress that may not be demonstrable to our patients and families. You know, my own family is affected by Alzheimer's disease, and so I wish I could say that my mother-in-law has experienced some help in that direction in terms of changing the course of her disease, but she has not. But the reality is that the scientific community has seen quite a bit of progress, and we have actually taken some steps, the Alzheimer's Association, the National Institute on Aging in the United States, to redefine the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. And you know, a part of what Mimi just mentioned is that we acknowledge that the disease didn't start with the symptoms, that we acknowledge that actually there were some biological changes there prior, so that we can tackle this similar to how we look at cardiovascular disease. That if you have high cholesterol, I'm not going to wait for you to have a heart attack to treat you. And so now looking at those types of changes in the brain and in the body that are reflective of potential dementia down the road, we're looking at how to treat that now instead of waiting for the dementia symptoms to set in.
So Drew, let's look upstream then. In the same way, if you can just look at somebody walk down the street and say, you're a heart attack waiting to happen. Can we do that for dementia by changing things upstream so that we just prevent people from getting it at all?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So there's been a lot of important work that's been happening in the prevention field, namely this summer in Copenhagen at the large international conference held by the Alzheimer's Association. There's an important study that came out from Karolinska Institute. It was the finger study, and what it essentially did was gave a recipe for how you could prevent or reduce your chances for Alzheimer's disease. And it's really as simple as whatever's good for your heart is good for your mind. So exercise, diet, social engagement, and these are going to be the keys to preventing the chances of having Alzheimer's. Starting
at the earliest of ages, I guess, eh?
Absolutely.
Right. Dirk, you're with the OECD.
Correct.
Now, I'm familiar with the OECD. That's an economic organization, or at least I always thought the focus was on economics. What are you doing involved in a health issue?
Well, the OECD actually works on almost any policy issue which governments work on. So we work on health policy, we work on social policy, we work on science innovation policy, and we work on economic policy. And I think if you really want to tackle this issue, you really need to bring all these areas together. So the meeting we had here in Toronto was really trying to bring together the people at the OECD who work on health policy and the people who work on innovation policy, because it's really about care and cure. We need to do both things at the same time. But I think there's also an important economic issue here, because basically the cost just basically to the care system at the moment already globally of Alzheimer's is about $600 billion globally, and that's going to be rising. I mean, because of the numbers you cited, I mean, it will be rising very quickly. So it's very hard to sustain that for governments, and we need to find a different way of developing our care so that we can actually sustain that. So it's about care and cure. We need to do both sides of that, but it is an economic issue, I think, as well, basically, because there are important impacts.
I guess, Maria, that $600 billion 15, 20, 25 years down the road is going to be well over $1 trillion.
It's 1.2 trillion is by our estimations.
Okay, so
we cannot afford it.
No.
Nobody can.
Right.
So what we really need to do is focus on care today and cure tomorrow. And that's really the focus of all of our discussions is if we delay, just even delay the onset of the dementia symptoms by 5 years, we could be saving countries billions of dollars, not only in economic costs to the healthcare systems, but I'm talking about caregivers and their informal care at home, which is about certainly $17 billion in the US alone. We have in the US alone 15 million caregivers. So if you think about the costs, the human costs, the family costs, the healthcare healthcare costs. It is really something that has to be taken care of and addressed by governments today.
Mimi, though, here's the tricky part. I think in the last Ontario budget, the health budget now is over $50 billion. It's 47% of the Ontario program spending, or 43, something like that. It's up there. Everybody wants their piece of that pie. I mean, hips and knees wants it, cancer wants it, heart wants it. You know, how do you make your case for it?
Well, I think two perspectives. One is greater investment in research. We really need, and that's critically a role of the federal government to support that. And they have, with the recent announcement of the Canadian Consortium on Neurodegeneration and Aging, to bring 340 researchers together in Canada to look at biomedical research, to look at clinical research, and to look at quality of life research. And that's the point around quality of life research. We need to know what are the best interventions, best way of delivering care and support to families and to people with the disease so that they can live longer in the community and reduce the opportunity or reduce the need to be admitted to a long-term care facility, to keep people in the community as long as possible. So the shift of care from focusing on acute care or long-term care, but in community.
I think in the past, most countries have had their own individual approaches to dealing with this. There seems to be a more international collaborative effort now to deal with this. What are your hopes for that?
Well, I can certainly say that we have great hopes, for example, even for the Canadian plan that hopefully will be announced very soon to tackle Alzheimer's disease. And because for one, in the United States, one advantage we've found with the national plan to address Alzheimer's that the Alzheimer's Association actually wrote and helped pass through Congress, has really rallied all of the resources within the country, because there are many. There's a Department of Aging, there's the VA, the Veterans Administration, there's the Department of the Defense, there's the National Institutes of Health. I mean, there are so many areas that can actually work together to coordinate support within one country. Added to that, if you can then contribute all of the country plans that can actually coordinate and work together, I think that has great potential.
America has a national strategy, yes?
That's correct. It was passed 3 years ago.
That raises the next question. Canada. Sheldon, if you would. 13 countries around the world have some form of national dementia strategy. Canada is not among them. Ottawa could be taking the lead in helping to develop a comprehensive health human resources plan that assembles the right mix of healthcare providers to properly care for the 747,000 Canadians with dementia. We need more geriatricians. There are only 260 in Canada. And we need to fully harness the great potential of multi-professional primary care teams. That's the new president of the Canadian Medical Association who said that. Why don't we have a national strategy in Canada?
Well, the reason we don't have one is that we actually have many components of a national dementia plan. We have outstanding research going on across the country. We have many elements of a plan that you may see in the US, the UK, Italy, soon to be announced, France.
Doesn't sound coordinated.
Well, the idea is that what we're proposing to the government, to the federal government, is to create the Canadian Alzheimer's Disease and Dementia Partnership that would really convene and bring thought leaders, researchers, industry, the Alzheimer's societies together, including people with the disease and their families, to actually define a comprehensive, integrated plan that has clear objectives and clear targets. And that is what we've proposed to the government. But we have various elements. As I said, the announcement of the Canadian Consortium on Neurodegeneration and Aging brings together all the researchers. We're doing tremendous work across the country, but people aren't aware of it, and part of it is the jurisdictional issue regarding provinces actually delivering health care versus the role of the federal government, who can put money towards research and who can set some national standards and national policies with regard to dementia care.
Many people look forward to retirement, a time of hard-earned rest and relaxation. But for some, retirement offers anything but that. Life after work can be challenging. We are joined now by some retirees who have found the transition to retirement was not exactly what they expected. And with that, we welcome Dr. Leslie Wiesenfeld. She is Deputy Psychiatrist in Chief at Mount Sinai Hospital. John Wright, who was a gastroenterologist and former CEO of the Scarborough Hospital. Mary McDonald, who's a retired civil servant with the province of Ontario. And Joyce Wayne, the living in retirement blogger for the Globe and Mail's investment section and an adjunct professor of journalism and literary arts at Sheridan College in Oakville. You're retired?
Kind of.
Kind of, yeah, okay. Let's go around the table here and just, we have a variety of experiences at the table and just see how everybody's doing. Hi, John. John, you ran a hospital.
Yes.
How many people did you have working under you?
3,000.
You had 3,000 people under you.
$350 million, 3,000.
And then one day, it's over.
It's over.
Did you know that day was coming?
Great question. No, because, no, I knew it was coming. I mean, it was fine. This was the end of my term. We were happy. I enjoyed the new CEO. All of that was fixed. But I'd been a doctor for years. I've been a gastroenterologist, and as a professional, I saw my retirement slowly going down from 4 days to 3 days to a half a day and maintaining all those relationships. Well, at age 65, I was suddenly CEO of a hospital, incredibly busy, 12-hour days, and the last day of work was 12 hours, and the next day was nothing. And I had not prepared myself for that. I hadn't
Why not?
thought about it. I'd been too busy. I thought, in the past, I'll just do this, and I have hundreds of interests and lots of things I enjoy doing. And those are interesting because when you're busy, the things that you crave are reading and walking, all solitary. Mm-hmm. When you're retired, you don't, it's not the solitary you need, it's the social interaction you need.
Which you no longer had.
Which I no longer had, abruptly. And as a CEO, they don't want you around anymore. Or as any senior administrator, the new guy's got to carry on. They don't want you second guessing. And so it was suddenly, there was empty time to fill.
And how well or not did you deal with that new reality?
Well, with the help of my wife and the help of my friends, fortunately I have many from high school, and I joined a board, a not-for-profit board, wonderful board. We establish book clubs for inmates in federal penitentiaries across the country.
Wow.
And that's been fun. And I always enjoyed cooking, and my wife is very busy, so I have taken over all of that, and I've gone to George Brown, taking their full culinary arts program, which I find absolutely exhausting.
So you've gone back to school all these years later.
I've gone back to school, yeah.
Isn't that great?
So, but it still is, there's lots of time to fill, and there's the issue of social isolation that you have to constantly guard against.
Okay, thank you for setting the table in that way. Okay, Mary, you ready to go?
Uh-huh.
What did you do for all those years?
Well, I'm on my own, so I was basically going back and forth to work.
You worked for the province of Ontario?
I worked for the province of Ontario.
A number of different jobs?
Yeah, a number of different jobs. And the last 8 years or so, I was in a fantastically collegial environment.
Which ministry?
It was Community Safety and Correctional Services.
And what did you do there?
I was doing proofing, editing, doing some writing.
Communications work.
Communications type work, yeah, and loved it. But mostly, as is often the case with it's the people that matter.
Sure.
And as someone said to me at my retirement, you might not miss the zoo, but you'll miss the animals. And I thought that was terrific. Yeah.
Now, why did you retire?
Well, my age came. I wasn't the 30 and out group or the 90 factor. I turned 65, and there were some changes going on in the office, and I thought, all right, maybe this is the time.
Did you really want to go?
I was ambivalent, and I had gone to the province's seminars that they offer for imminent retirees. But what I found was that they were largely financial in their focus. So I got all that under my belt. But what nobody seemed to deal with was the emotional impact.
And what was that?
Well, I hadn't bargained for that. I retired in December, and I was going into the spring of 13, and then into the summer, and it was a beautiful summer. So I thought, this is great. This is a holiday, right? An extended holiday. It wasn't until October came that the reality kind of hit me that I have nowhere to go. What is my purpose? And then it started to really become a reality of having nowhere to go, having no job, being disconnected from this environment that I was in, this happy working environment that I was in. And the isolation became a real issue because I don't have the extended family that I could call on. So it was tough. It was.
I noticed the Ontario Legislature is going to start sitting again in about a month, and I wonder if, as you get closer to that, do you start perking up a little bit just by habit, you know? Because Queen's Park gets back into business.
Yeah.
And that was your business for a long time.
For a long time when I was younger, yeah, it was. And it certainly piques your interest, that's for sure. And your heart starts beating faster and so forth, but yeah.
Joyce, I joked off the top that you don't sound very retired at all. You sound busier than you used to be. What did you used to do?
I used to teach journalism at Sheridan College for 25 years, and before that I worked as a journalist and in publishing for 12 years. So I worked for 37 years before I retired.
And when you say retired, it's in inverted commas for you. So what do you mean you're retired?
Well, it really is in inverted commas. I planned it for a long time. What I always wanted to do was to write, and that's what I wanted to do full time. But I couldn't, like most people who want to write, because I had a family and commitments and work and so forth, and I needed to have a job, which I did for 37 years. But for the last 5 years of those, I started working on a novel. I took a sabbatical for a year from the college, which is lovely, and I wrote a novel.
So you saw that date on the calendar that John saw, but instead of like John, when the moment just arrived and it was boom, it's like falling off a table, you were ready.
I was really ready, and part of that is just the luck of working in the public sector to a certain extent, in the college sector too, because they're very good at saying, this is how much your pension is going to be, this is what life is going to look like, and there were seminars and things like that. And I really knew what I wanted to do. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. So I won't say I wasn't nervous. The month before I retired, I was really anxious. I thought, how am I going to pull this off financially? I was very concerned about that. Did I add up all the numbers correctly? Things like that. But when it came, it was absolutely marvelous.
Now, why are you still teaching?
Because I need the money.
Okay.
Because it's not quite enough. I'm 63 and it's not quite enough money. So, and also, I think as your other guests, I have to admit that I just very much like my colleagues. I enjoyed the social life at the college. We have a great office. It's in the arts. There's filmmakers, there's animators, there's all sorts of people. It's like a big sandbox. And I still love going in and spending time with them.
The transgender rights movement is gaining momentum and increasingly drawing attention. Have services, laws, and greater visibility improved the lives of transgender individuals, and where do they fit in the world at large? Joining us now to discuss that and more, Herschel Russell. He is a psychotherapist, educator, and consultant specializing in LGBT and transgender counseling. Nicole Nussbaum, lawyer and transgender advocate. Danielle Araya, education facilitator at the 519 Church Street Community Centre in Toronto. Kusha Dadui, trans program coordinator at the Sherburne Health Centre, also here in Toronto. And Sherry DeNovo, NDP member of the Ontario Legislature for Parkdale High Park. She's the critic for her party for LGBTQ issues. And Sherry, in all the time we've had you on the program, I don't think we've ever seen you
with the collar on.
With the collar on. We have to remind everybody you're a United Church minister.
I am indeed.
I know you want to be a minister of the crown, but you actually have been for a long time a minister of the cloth.
And that's primary.
That's primary, okay. Last night, we played the second part of this documentary by Stephen Fry. Out there, we want to play a little clip off the top, and then we'll come back and chat, okay? Roll tape, please.
I've always loved drag queens. It's one of the, if you like, sort of surprising things to some, is that those who are the most femme, those who glam themselves up and are more than camp, they're actually feminine in their dress and their attire, are probably the most courageous of all the gay community. Historically, it was the drag queens who fought the police at Stonewall that kick-started really the gay liberation movement. It's, I suppose, the daily act of walking down the street in drag makes them often be at the very forefront of the strongest and most angry reactions against homophobia.
Herschel, your reaction to what you just saw?
There's some very real truth to that. for drag queens, but for drag queens it's a performance where they go on stage, perform, and then they come off the stage and they are once again men. There are many trans women who nobody would know that their history is that of being trans, but there are also many trans women who are visibly trans. And for them, walking out their front door every day requires a level of courage that is really quite extraordinary. And we do know that trans women, in particular trans women of color, are more vulnerable to assault than any other group. So they're facing that very direct physical threat, not to mention the disapproval and the ridicule and all of those awful ways that transphobia works.
Despite the fact that one of the biggest stars on television today is a trans woman of color. We'll get into that in a bit.
Yes.
Stay tuned. Danielle, your view on what you just saw.
Well, I agree with Herschel. I think as a trans woman of color specifically, I feel the struggles of Stonewall still, because as a trans woman of color and Latina, I understand that, you know, our issues are still being met by other communities within the LGBT spectrum. And we're still struggling just to get our voices heard still. And so I think looking back at Stonewall, there were two leaders that were really instigators, I think, in that riot, Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson. And a lot of their names and their recognition has been lost over the years because they were women of color. One was black and one was Latina. And so I think it's always good to remember Stonewall, but remember really who was left out of those discussions, and then the following marches that were claimed by the gay rights movement instead of the trans rights movement.
Remind me, Stonewall is New York City, 1969.
Like the last week of June, and that's why we honor it every June, last week of June here in Toronto.
Gotcha. Okay, Nicole, you saw the clip. Your thoughts?
Well, I think there's a lot of commonality in terms of the issues that face the LGBT community and the trans community. I think a lot of the discrimination and harassment that gay, lesbian, and bisexual people face comes from a societal discomfort with gender variance or gender diversity. And that's what's most visible about people who are LG or B, and certainly it's extremely visible about people who are transgender. I think the point was made that trans people are visible. This is how trans people are. So walking down the street exposes people to being noticed, being surveilled at higher levels, and it becomes difficult for some people to go about their daily life, going shopping, going to work, dealing with those sorts of things.
You can feel it. You can feel being surveilled a lot.
Absolutely. And I think it varies for different people. But yes, there's certainly a heightened sense of fear or awareness of your surroundings to try to make sure that you're safe and that you won't be harassed or assaulted.
Yeah. Kusha, your view.
I also agree with Danielle. I think she said it beautifully. And I feel that it also is rooted in societal misogyny, like the way that if one is seen as more feminine, they're more prone to abuse. And again, particularly trans women of color, and I see that in my work all the time. It's less safe, and they're more likely to get incarcerated. They're more likely to face abuse and violence.
Sherry.
I would simply add that the courage comes with a cost, and the cost is particularly high for the trans community. We're looking at 50% of the population making less than $15,000 a year. We're looking at high rates of attempted suicide, higher than any other single minority group.
I've seen more than 40%. More than 40% of trans people.
50%.
50% attempt suicide.
Yeah, yeah. So that courage comes with a cost. So that's what I think people need to know about the trans community, and certainly that's something that we really, that message needs to get out, that although the laws changed in Ontario, and we're proud of that, that now we have a lot of work to do to put that law into effect.
We're going to talk about that law in just a second. You were instrumental in making it happen. Transphobia and homophobia, what's the difference?
They overlap in all kinds of important ways, but they're both a repugnance against a group of people around issues of gender.
Homophobia, everybody seems to understand. They know what that is. Do you think the public understands what transphobia is yet?
Barely. And I think people don't often recognize the ways it works. And I think one of the important things here is that it works somewhat differently for trans men than for trans women, and very differently for anyone who's from a racialized minority. That transphobia against trans women is now called transmisogyny, which I think is a really useful term. And someone who's much funnier than me called it misogyny on steroids. And I think that's accurate. But at the core of it is ridicule. There's this assumption that we in our very beings are ridiculous and have no rights to safety, to respect, to belonging, to love, to any of those things. And Laverne Cox, who you were just mentioning, speaks about that so powerfully and effectively.
Let's put her picture up, because yes. I don't know how many of you watching us now know of the television program Orange is the New Black. It's a very popular program, particularly in the United States. There is the first trans woman of color to be sure, ever to make the cover of Time magazine. That's Laverne Cox, who was born Roderick Cox, a man, in Alabama, and who is now one of the biggest stars in American pop culture. How important is all of that to what we're talking about here today? Nicole?
Well, I think Laverne Cox would say that she was not born a man, she was born a child. She was assigned a sex, assigned a gender at birth, but that never reflected who she was. So I just want to make that point.
You know, it's a good point. I'm still learning myself what the right way to express all of this is. So to say Laverne Cox was born male is inaccurate in your view.
Well, what you said was she was born a man,
right.
I think. And male and man can be distinguished. If you look at, I mean, what we do know now that perhaps we didn't know 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 50 years ago is that the process of sex differentiation is much more complex than simply XX is a woman, XY is a man.
The chromosomes.
The chromosomes, and all of the cis sexist assumptions that come with if a child is born XY with particular physical characteristics, that they will then like trucks and sports
no, I get that.
And those sorts of things.
Fair enough, fair points. But Kusha, when you see somebody who's trans on the front of a magazine with a big starring part in a major American television series, award-winning television series, what does that do for the movement?
Me personally, looking at her as a trans woman of color and seeing her speak so eloquently about this, and it makes me feel empowered. You know, I have so much respect for her, and but we still have a long way to go.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review. You can see all of those programs in their entirety. They're on our website, theagenda.tvo.org, on our iTunes channel, or on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.